frequently asked questions that I've come across that I was gonna go ahead and have you discuss and give your input on. So the first question is what to do after. Okay, so some of these people write the questions kind of weird. I'm gonna try to see what they're trying to say. What to do after panels after an asphalt roof is replaced. So they're asking, hello, shopping for panels right now for my brand new roof. Getting in at about 2.7 per watt. However, what do I do with my panels and microinverters when the roof needs replacement? Convert to ground mount, reinstall?
So depending on how long you've had your panels would determine whether they're worth keeping. Generally speaking, Enphase equipment has a 25-year warranty. So if you're not quite at that 25 years, it is definitely worth reinstalling to get the most money out of your system, the best ROI, if you want to say it that way. But there are options to put it on a ground mount if you choose to do so. However, if you're putting on a new roof anyways, your roof will outlast your solar system. So the cheaper option is definitely to put it back on your roof.
Okay. And who would usually do that? Would I have to call the original company or?
Yeah, so typically the original installer would be the one to take it off and put it back on. The reason there being, of course, the warranties and liabilities involved. If you get someone else to do it, you might void your warranty with your original installer as it is no longer their installation when you reinstall it. So you are much better off going with your original installer, unless, of course, they're out of business. Then your next best option is to find a different local installer that will either give their own warranty or workmanship warranty for the system, or provide you with the best options from there.
Okay. So this is some questions that people typically ask solar companies before they hire, and I thought that was a great thing to discuss, just for people to understand what solar is, how it works, just the general process. Very, very basic questions. So the first question is, I want to understand the different types of panels and inverters available. So specifically to understand the difference with panels in regards to efficiency, degradation, temperature coefficient ratings.
Okay, so there are many panels out there. Typically the panel is the strongest link in the system. It doesn't make that big of a difference. It's probably the least important decision out of the entire system. However, there are panels that do better with higher heat. Some panels do better in the cold, and that's where that temperature coefficient comes in place. Depending on the quality of the panel and the manufacturer, there are different levels of warranties. Some of them come with the standard 10-year warranty, some with 25-year warranties. Those warranties, if I was to take the Q-cell panel for example, it doesn't mean after 25 years that the panel is going to stop working. The panel is actually guaranteed to produce over 80% of its original production at 25 years.
The second part of that question would be, I know that Enphase and Solar Edge are one of the most popular ones. What is the difference in their microinverters?
So SolarEdge doesn't actually have a microinverter. They have something called an optimizer. The microinverter, however, that Enphase offers is a separate, as the name says, mini inverter that's located under each and every single panel, and it operates independently of each other. So if one was to stop working or burn out or go bad, only that one panel would be affected, and the rest of the panels would still operate. In the case of SolarEdge, the optimizer, they are still paired together in a string. So if one goes down, the other optimizers, for the most part, pick up the slack and the rest of the string continues to work. However, if too many optimizers go down in the same string, it could cause the whole string to collapse.
All right. Another question was all about warranty coverages. So what kind of warranties do you typically see? Is it usually just the warranty on the components of the solar system? Is it typically combined with labor? How does that usually work in your typical company setting?
Every piece of equipment has its own manufacturer's warranty. The installers can and usually do offer workmanship warranties for the installation of the products. As far as replacing any defected or bad equipment, those are covered by the manufacturer. We come out and we troubleshoot the bad component with the manufacturer on the phone, and then they send out a new part for us to come out and replace.
Okay. And for that labor, would the homeowner typically have to pay for that labor, or is that included in the cost?
If it's under warranty, that's included in the original installation cost.
Okay, great. Good to know. And there's just a general misconception on the whole installation process. So I just wanted you to go ahead and go over the entire, just a brief explanation of what does the installation process actually look like? What are the timelines typical? I know there's, some times where you have issues with permits in the city, but what is the just typical timeline of how long it would take? Would it take months? Would it take weeks? Would it take days? What is your typical timeline that you see after installing multiple solar systems on homes?
So the planning and permitting process, as you said, depending on the county, could take some time. Typically, to create a plan set, you're looking at a couple business days, maybe 5 max. After that, it does get sent over to the permitting department, where it could take some time. As soon as the permits are available, we are able to start work, assuming the availability of equipment is that it's available for purchase and there's no back orders. Depending on the size of your system, like a 20 panel system is probably a 1-day installation. We'll come out, we'll install everything all in 1 day. At that point, there is still some inspections that you have to go through. Typically, those are scheduled a couple days after the installation is complete. Once the inspection is done, it's then in the utilities court, where they have the option to come out and inspect the equipment should they want to or need to. With PG&E, that's typically a 30-day wait period. With SMUD, I think it's a little bit faster. I think it's 2 weeks, but they do have to come out and install a separate meter, so that part takes a little bit of time as well. Overall, from start to finish, you're looking at about a month or 2, assuming there's no delays on equipment and the installer is not back scheduled too far out.
Okay. So a month or 2 is kind of what you're saying.
Yeah.
All right. Now, cost per watt. Is the cost per watt typically the same across companies, or should you shop around? What is the average price right now in June of 2025 of cash per watt?
You should definitely shop around. You should always get a few quotes to make sure you're getting the best price. Depending on the equipment that you choose will determine the cost per watt. For example, in the Enphase system, there's additional components that are installed under the solar panels on the roof that are called the microinverters. Those components add additional costs, if you were to install, say, the Tesla system, on the other hand, the inverter is a central inverter that's located in the battery, in the Powerwall 3. So on the roof, there's less components, making the solar portion lower cost per watt, but it does require the battery itself to operate the system. Whereas the Enphase microinverters can operate without that battery component. It could be a standalone solar system.
Okay. What about incentives and credits? Are there any federal or local incentives right now available? So we're located in the state of California, in the city of Sacramento area. So do you know of any local specifically incentives in this area?
Well, federally, there is a federal tax credit of 30% on all solar battery systems. As of this moment, there's a chance it might be going away soon. However, as far as specific local incentives, there is a SMUD program going on right now where they are doing rebates on battery installs. There's a couple manufacturers on their list, but they will give you a direct rebate for every battery that you install. Of course, it includes a participation in their My Energy Optimizer Pro program, which you can find some more details on online. But they also, on top of that, offer quarterly incentives to continue participating in the program.
Alrighty. And what are those quarterly incentives? Do you know?
The last numbers I heard, we'll take the Tesla Powerwall for example. That's probably the most popular product out there. You get $5,000 back per battery, up to 3 batteries, so potential of $15,000 back. And then you get $110 quarterly while you participate in the program, which with 1 battery gives you an annual of $440 in annual incentives to have that battery.
Okay, I have a side note question, because I remember a job that we did before where there was a miscommunication between the customers and how they wanted their conduit run. And I just figured you would explain how conduit is typically run and your options on conduit. Let me rephrase the question. What are my options for conduit runs? I know some people really care about the aesthetics of the front of their house and would prefer not to have anything showing. And so are there options to go inside in a hidden, to run the conduit in a hidden way instead of kind of out there? What are your options for conduit runs, essentially?
There are a couple options. We can do external conduit on the exterior of the house. Some local HOAs do frown upon that and have specific rules and regulations as to where you can have conduit on the exterior of a house. Of course, it's always important to paint the conduit. That way it blends in with the house and makes it much less visible. However, in those places where conduit isn't really allowed, or if the customer does not like the appearance of conduit, we do run the wires through the attic and in the walls. There are some additional costs to do so, but it does make the system look a lot more nice, clean, and put together in a lot of cases.
All right. So this is some questions that people have asked that I've come across, and you can just feel free to answer as you see. Are microinverters better than the alternative? I'm not sure what they're referring to as the alternative, but
microinverters are, specifically the Enphase microinverters, are really good. They are the most reliable in my experience. There are other options like the solar edge optimizers, and of course if you go with like a Tesla Powerwall, there's nothing on the roof. All there is rapid shutdown devices. So it does, as mentioned previously, make the cost of the solar portion less. However, the redundancy and how would I say that? The redundancy of the microinverters makes it so that even if one component goes out, the rest of the system keeps working. I've been to quite a few systems that are well aged, and even though they have 1 or 2 microinverters that may have gone down over a period of time, or maybe they lost communication, the system still continues working. Even though you can't see it working, it's still doing its work. And that's kind of the beauty of the Enphase system, is there's so many backups to the backups that if you need complete peace of mind that your system is going to work, even if a small part goes out, it makes it really, really valuable in that sense. Also, with the microinverter and optimizer technology, you are able to do what we call panel level monitoring, where you can see each individual panel, what it's doing, how much it's producing, and also makes it easier to service, because if one goes out, we know exactly which one it is that went out, and we don't have to guess.